Hey guys, here's the 224 Predator that I picked up from Harbor Freight and showed you in the last video. This is what we're putting it in. The Mega-Moto 212 from GoPowersports.com. Follow along while I put this thing together. Thanks for watching. GoPowersports sells several different versions of the Mega-Moto 212. The version that I chose is the one that comes without the engine installed. I've started going through the installation instructions, and the first bit is all about unboxing it. Unfortunately, what I received wasn't packed quite as well as what was listed in the book. You can see here we've got some scrapes and scuffs on the bodies of the forks. There's a few scrapes and scuffs. Nothing through the powder coating on the actual body. It definitely wasn't packed as well as it was indicated it should be in the manual. Not a big deal. This is going to be ridden down dusty old back roads, and a few little scrapes and scuffs here or there is not going to impact my opinion of the machine at all. Step one tells us that we should be putting the triple tree. Actually, it's like this, and the front fork assemblies together onto the frame. So let me move stuff around on the table here. We'll get the frame over where we can get at it, and we'll start working on those assemblies. One thing they don't mention in the instructions about the putting the triple tree together is greasing any bearings. We've got a tapered style, similar to what you'd find in an automobile wheel. The races that the bearing fits into are already up in the front of the frame here. However, the bearings have no grease on them, and I've got some wheel bearing grease. It should work well for greasing the bearing. One problem that we do have, however, is that this bearing is pressed on, and with it being pressed on there, I can't get in there to force lubricant into the rollers the way you would normally do it when packing a bearing. But I guess we'll do the best we can. Just kind of tamp the grease into the rollers, down into the top Normally you do this from the wide end, and then it kind of acts like a funnel to force the grease into the bearing. And of course we've got a terrible mess. It does feel like we've got grease packed in around all those wonderful rollers. Not ideal, but it is what it is. And just to keep it from rusting and exposed moisture, I'll throw some grease on that center shaft, and now we'll take the bearing and we will do a standard packet. Just repeatedly tap against the palm of your hand and a big lump of grease until you start to get grease coming out of the rollers themselves. You can buy like a cone that's designed to do this with very little mess, but especially with a pair of black vinyl gloves like I have on, it's not a big deal to just pack the grease in. The good news is this isn't like it's a wheel bearing where it's going to be running down the road at 50 miles an hour or anything. It is just the steering bearing. But having grease in there is definitely better than having none. We'll put our bearing retainer down. With its large nut. That sets our preload on our bearings. I've just got it finger tight for now. We take one of the thin washers, put it down, take the top plate off the triple tree, lay it in place, Lay down another large washer. Now we put our top retaining nut. Give this all a little wipe up so we don't have too much grease getting all over everything. Next item on the install list is going to be our front forks. A chrome plated bolt screws out of the end, and the Mega-Moto label goes out. We'll just hand tighten that for now, and of course repeat with the other side. And now it says to snug these down. It does give a torque value, but unfortunately my torque wrench is too big. That feels appropriate. Book says 25 foot-pounds of torque. Now it says we're supposed to start routing the brake lines. Unfortunately, it hasn't told us to install the handlebars yet. Let me grab the handlebars. Here's our handlebar assembly. Comes with dual hydraulic brakes, which is kind of impressive for a small bike like this. And obviously one is for the rear of the bike and one is for the front. Caliper will mount down on the front wheel assembly, something like that. Although it doesn't specifically say to, we're going to just kind of put the handlebars in the holders here, only because that'll make routing the brake cables much easier. Pull the electrical controls back and get the brakes out of the way. There are knurls on the handlebars that will engage with the hold downs. I don't want to do the final setup on the handlebar angle until I'm able to sit on the bike and see how it feels. Kind of give it a little bit of adjustment for an adult as opposed to a kid. And here's our front brake. We've got these spool shaped rubber grommets, and they need to clip into the this hold down clip. There'll be another one of those mounted down at the bottom here once we get the caliper mounted to the fork. Now it wants us to tighten up these pinch bolts on here. They look to be, I don't know, they look to be about a 10 mil socket on a 1/4 inch drive. Just give that a little snugging. Now it says to tighten up the top nut to 40 foot-pounds. This is a 1.25 inch because I don't have any metric that's that big. That feels like about 40 foot-pounds. Next step says that they want all of the cables routed through the opening on the handlebars here. The rear brake is down this side. The front brake moved behind the shock on this side. And now we have our switch on this side, and our kill switch is over on the other side, and it routes down as well. Now it says to install these two nuts here, but they were already installed and they appear to be good and snug, so I'm not going to worry about those. Now we're supposed to do the front fender and the headlight assembly. I haven't opened the headlight yet. Looks like a pretty cheesy bulb in there, but the wire mesh on the front is a nice touch. Kind of keep any stones from breaking the lens of the light. Plug is tucked up underneath, and we need to back off these bolts on the sides or drop the bracket down below the bottom lip of the headlight. One problem that we have is the manual doesn't give a really clear call out for what hardware is supposed to be used where. These are 2 bolts with the appropriate looking nuts, but it doesn't really give sizes. However, they do fit in the holes quite nicely, so I think these are probably what we're looking for. We'll start them on one side, then we'll do the other, and then we'll snug things up. We've got our 3-wire connector from the headlight, little pigtail. We've got our main wiring harness, and we plug it in. I have to admit these connectors are a little bit on the, shall we say, chintzy side, and I probably would like to see them replaced with something of a little higher quality. These plugs can only go in one way, and they do have a clip to retain them, but as I say, not the highest quality wiring in the world. Now we are getting to the point where we need to mount our front wheel. I think we're going to have to push this thing back a little bit so that it kind of supports itself on the table, because if we hang our front wheel right now, the whole frame is going to tip down on the floor. The wheels that came with the bike are very similar. Obviously, this is the rear one. It has the drive sprocket and a brake disc. This is the front. It has just the brake disc. Brake disc goes on the what looks like the right hand side to you guys, but is actually the left hand side if you were sitting on the seat of the bike. And if it's in here, this is going to be interesting. Tab here, it says has to be pointed in. Here is our axle bolt. Goes through just a little ways, gets a spacer. Slide all the way through, comes out the other side. Again, just a little bit. There's the nub of the bolt sticking out. Here's our spacer. Spacer on. Just a little bit more and ta-da! We got a front wheel. Now it's time to set up the front brakes. First of all, we've got a little spacer that's in between the brake pads so that they don't accidentally get actuated, which appears to have happened. Caliper doesn't want to retract, so we'll put a C-clamp on it and give it a little bit of a squish. That'll hopefully drive the piston back without doing any harm to anything else. Now we can get this plastic piece out of here. And we can slide the brake caliper in place. And I think it's safe to say that this is the brake hardware. 2 bolts, which is what we need to hold the caliper in place, and we've got our little bracket here. It's going to hold the brake line. .13mm puts the brake caliper bolt in. We'll get this one spun in a little ways, and we'll get the bottom one lined up. The bracket that we're attaching in here kind of floats a little bit on the on pins. You can see this rubber bumper here, and it allows the caliper to float a little bit, and that's why we had such a hard time getting it to line up, is that it isn't necessarily in perfect alignment with the brake pads at the moment. Once we get everything snugged up and get a couple of miles on here, I'm sure everything will line up quite nicely. Give those two a good tightening up. Now we have front brakes. Well guys, that's basically got the front end of this machine put together. I think that's a logical place to end this video. Yeah, we're going to make this probably about a 3-parter. In the next video, we'll probably get the rear suspension set up. Probably the video after that, we'll do the drivetrain and the motor. Check back and we'll get into the rest of this. Thanks a lot for watching. Greatly appreciated. Do me a favor, hit that thumb up button. Appreciate it if you could throw me a subscribe. Maybe ring that bell icon. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll catch you in the next mess.